Carl Madison is our presenter today. If y'all have tuned into the last seminar, you have met him before. We became friends with Carl when he started helping us with Plan Giving Navigator. He's the director of giving resources at the Presbyterian Foundation in the DC area. He works with churches kind of like we do, and as our tagline suggests, where faith and money come together. He's a frequent presenter. We find him to be knowledgeable and engaging. And without further ado, let me just turn it over to Carl, and I'll try to join in later. Carl?
Hi, Rob. Can you hear me? Fantastic. Now, I'm also going to ask to verify if you can see my screen. I know that we normally would have this set up nicely in advance. Engaging generosity. Fantastic. Well, I'm thrilled. I'm also thrilled to be with you all. Thank you, Rob, for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be with you all. Usually under less intense circumstances, I want to apologize for any technical delays that kind of are on my plate. So let's kick this conversation off. So talking about money is hard. It's always hard, but it's especially hard this year. This year is different. We can fill in our own top reasons for why. You know, pandemic, we have racial divisions and unrest, we've got natural disasters, social distancing, there's this disconnect that we all have with each other, but even with the loss of connections with family. The economy, the markets are not so bad, but we've got unemployment, empty church buildings. You know, this list is daunting. And the profound personal toll these have had on each of us is significant. This has really been a messed up year. Yet we as Christians, we are the church, and God is desperately in need. We are desperately in need of God today. And you and I are his hands and feet in this world. And we matter that much. Yet the church is not just bricks and mortar, it's alive and it needs our energy to thrive. Yet, again, thriving is hard this year. Generosity overall is expected to struggle this year. I'm thrilled to see that it has recovered some. We'll see how we get through the end of this year, and there's a bit of caution for next year, and we can dive a little bit more into that at the end of this if there's interest in going in that direction. But nevertheless, with fewer charitable dollars, givers are going to be much more discerning for these coming years after this pandemic. Let's frame today's conversation in terms of the part of stewardship that is financial. We're going to talk just about financial today. I know stewardship means so much more, but our task at hand is to explore these financial challenges and these solutions for our ministries. So today we'll talk through the church's challenge at this unique time in history. It's not all rosy, but we'll talk about our church advantage and the opportunity from it. And we'll cover some ideas to bring those opportunities to fruition. First, let's talk about that challenge. And let's make that plural, the challenge is, because we're riding these cross currents of two church financial storms this year. One that will stay with us for a much longer time, and one that's temporary. It could be a year, it could be more, we're not sure. But the general challenge right now, this longer term one, is this church's long-term and fairly steady decline in individual giving. You know, general philanthropy remains strong. Individual charitable giving rose 4.2% between 2018 and 2019. And even inflation adjusted, that's the second highest level on record. Yet stewardship, church stewardship, is challenged. You know, decades ago, most of all of our charitable benevolence came through the church. And it's totally different today. Now there are up to 1.7 million, mostly younger nonprofit organizations who are highly skilled at fundraising for their important missions. And a good steward in our churches today might no longer give only through our church, but they're going through to another, on average, 4 nonprofits each year. So we have to share a whole lot of that charitable dollar. So there's this same inflation-adjusted giving with far more entities now vying for those donations. And here's a real quick example of why. In 1987, you look at this pie chart, religious donations comprised about 53% of all giving. That's the blue side of the pie chart. All went to churches. The orange went to nonprofits. By 2019, religious donations fell to only 31% of all giving, and that's in 33 years. There's a massive fall considering the hundreds of billions of dollars that that comprise all of the giving. So this church decline has been steeper than past cycles, and giving to the church has then also declined by a total of about 40%. So imagine for every dollar that there was, 30 to 40 years ago, there's now 60 cents. So the general longer term financial situation for the church has certainly been a challenge. I think we're all grappling with that. But this year, we have gotten slammed by this pandemic. It's the year. A huge part of what we are as the church is together. Our togetherness is a huge component of what we do, who we are, and not being together, once together is torn away from us, it's a pretty dark time for a lot of people. And I just listed a few things here. There's so much more than this, but this year we're distanced from worship and from gathering. That's a real big challenge for us as a church, and importantly for stewardship. It's a lonely time. The church feels like it's doing much less. I hear this from all corners. The distance between us makes it much harder to feel connected, and it's more complex to continue the same level of ministry and support. In fact, even though our actions might feel and even be quantitatively less, it is far more work to do it. And at this time, doing it is perhaps more important than ever. Members are not witnessing the impact of their stewardship through church. This is a big deal. If we're not there, we don't see it, we don't know it, we don't hear it. Members are suffering hardships. That is happening at many churches, and some much worse than others. There's poor health, employment challenges, isolation for membership. And this is going to likely continue for some time. Forecasts are all over the place, how long, but it's something we all need to prepare for. And finally, the offering plate is for most of the churches where I am non-existent. It's not happening now, and it won't for a long time. But plate offering is of varying importance, but having it go away entirely is pretty traumatic. So this confluence of events has made this year and next year a real mess. But now let's talk a little bit about Advantage. Advantage, it's perhaps a strange title for the second part of the conversation, because it might convey hope that many churches aren't feeling. Also, it might convey competition, competition specifically with nonprofits. And that feels weird because we don't want to be in competition with them. In fact, many of the nonprofits we love so much are born from our initiatives within the church. Yet it's true that the increasing proportion of charitable dollars that's gone every year more and more to nonprofits. So in reality, the dollars that aren't coming to the church are going there. Because they're extremely adept at appealing for the available charitable giving. And it's a zero-sum game, and that's to our loss as the church. Yet, in this current crisis, we might actually have an advantage. Here it is. Our advantage is that the engine for charitable giving is in our pews. And their generosity is a direct result of why they are here in our church, of why they are part of our church family. It's their Christian faith. And they're generous because of their faith. And our church is their faith home. And all of that's really bold to say without some numbers proving it out. These are not bold statements without a lot of evidence. And I'll just pick a couple of things to show this. So these bar charts, really small numbers, and I'm sorry about that. So I tried to enlarge the important things on those green arrows. Christian and other households of faith are amazingly generous. Annual donations by religious households average about $1,590 a year, while those that are not religious affiliated are about $695 a year, about 53% lower. So Christian households are clearly the engine for charitable giving. And 62% of religious households give to charities, while 46% of non-religious give to charities. So our church is the cause of a person's inclination to give, and the cause of their the turbocharging, let's say, of their giving. So altogether, our churches are estimated to be the catalyst of about 75% of giving in the United States. That is enormous. So generosity in the United States is anticipated to struggle. We'll see how it ends out this year. It's going to depend on a whole lot of things. But assuming fewer charitable dollars, givers are going to be much more discerning going through the coming years. And churches have the potential to be in a relatively strong position for giving. We've already talked about them being the engine, the catalyst for giving. But for us, it's very important that the church is at the core of their faith life, ergo their giving life. We're at the core of their giving ethos. So even though the church is now sharing those fixed charitable dollars with 4 to 5 other charitable causes, there's a hierarchy of connection. And the church is often the first in the concentric circles of responsibility for our membership. So it stands to reason that members feel that the tightest connection to our church is to our church. Out of all the average givers, 4 to 5 charitable causes. So whereas that share going to nonprofits may be significant in the past, and maybe again this year, our members' core faith and their giving principles are grounded here at church, and they're far more likely to peel off those outer gifts, those outer nonprofits that are further out from their core. Another advantage is that this is a moment for the church. This time of crisis is critical, that our work as the church may be most needed, most relevant, and most visible this year. So I guess the most helpful thing from that perspective is for us to do our job, to be the church and knock it out of the park. And then we'll have this story. Then we can show this impact. And it makes it a lot easier to talk about money, especially to ask for money when we have solved all of these challenges and more, these challenges that are listed here. So looking back at these challenges, this kind of illuminates our most relevant work to do in the near future, and perhaps our most exciting stories to tell. So let's get into this third section. What can I do to make this a good year? And what can we do to make next year a good year? I feel a lot more fear from churches right now about next year than I do fear about this year. Many are talking about more budget concerns in the coming year. So this is applicable really through the end of this year on through 2021. So what can we do to foster stewardship of our congregation? Fundraising. Yikes is what I expect to hear from most people. So let's try to tame that image. Let's foster an environment like we always have for Christian stewardship. It's really the same concepts going forward, but we want to select some of the ideas and principles from the fundraising industry, if you will. It's aggravating, I know, to think of it as fundraising. I feel that aggravation too, but we have been forced into these, let's say, tactics by its decline, especially relative to the burgeoning of the nonprofits that we're really forced to compete with for that limited charitable dollar. And so I'd love to take a moment. We can all admit that the added load and that gets onto our shoulders, and the different skill set that it feels like it is, but it's not a different skill set. In fact, it could be a much more enriching experience for any giver in our church. It can be an enriching experience in the relationship of us with that giver, and also for yours and my own personal experience with money, to view it in a different way. Actually might have some really outstanding and uplifting positive consequences for us. So the rest of this conversation deals with aspects of fundraising, and hopefully it will all fit your level of comfort. I was extremely uncomfortable with it very early on because I was afraid it's all just about asking, calling people up and asking for money. And quite frankly, it's not. So let's diffuse that term real quick. And let's also diffuse this negative connotation that stewardship sometimes has, that it's all about money, because it feels bad. But maybe even if you cannot shake that idea that it's heavily about money, let's at least revisit the purpose of money, because that's going to help. I love this stuff. I was in banking for the first half of my career before I came into working with the church. And I love money because I love the concept. It is fascinating. Let's kick this off with, what do you envision when you hear the word money? Is it a wadded up and a torn bill, or stacked coins in a bank? Is it debt, or maybe is it an intangible notion like wealth or greed or power? Is it Bitcoin? These are all just our own personal experiences with money driving what our responses would be, but they're distant from the core function and the meaning of money. Rather, these are all descriptors that centers on feelings and social consequences and tools and tactics. These are all thoughts formed by our own personal experience with an understanding of money, but our descriptions are so narrowly focused that they don't often overlap even with each other. We would all have a different perspective. So here's the question: how do we talk about money if we aren't even seeing the same thing when we say that word? The answer is that we need to peel off these outer layers, these concepts of money that we've applied to it, to its original and continued purpose, and base our thought process on widely accepted principles. So let's get closer to that true nature of what money is, and maybe that'll make our conversations a lot easier. So now this really small piece of paper becomes immensely powerful, because all of my daily work and yours converts into this cotton paper. All of my earthly assets can or have converted into this. All of my family's and heirs' resources that have been passed down in this form, whether it's from my care or use or preservation, have come in this form. So now that all of my work and my assets transform into this little piece of paper, I can store it in this. This is a storage tool until I'm ready to redeploy it into its next use, or to share this energy source on with someone else. So within this little piece of paper is a massive amount of energy, and it's waiting for its moment to get triggered into action. So if we can agree on the core function of money, we can all see its next form. We can all maybe see its possibilities and its opportunities, perhaps the joy that this thing can bring through ministry. So that when we trigger this little bill into action, it actually is us. It's actually us working by proxy. This is our proxy doing something amazing. So we're converting our work into ministry. We are redeploying our surpluses into a power source that enables us to work through the church every single day. I can work through my church every single day. It shows up on Monday morning to turn on the lights. It introduces our children to God. It preaches, an inspiring sermon. It makes possible virtual worship. It's gas in the tank to go to visit someone sick. And because of your energy, because of my energy, we can hold someone's hand in their last moments of life. We together can do that. We can, because of this, house our homeless neighbors, give them a warm meal on a freezing night. Because of this energy, we can dig a well for a community in Africa who needs water. This is the most amazing energy source. So our greatest opportunity to turn this cotton piece of paper, which represents our work and our savings, turn this cotton into our generosity. It's preaching. Top thing. It's the one thing that you have that all other nonprofits would trade everything in their toolbox for. They are spending a lot of time, a lot of money just to catch the eye of all of those people that show up in our pews, or these days who are sitting in their barca loungers and listening to us. Either time, it's for, let's say, an hour a Sunday at a minimum during the week. And how jealous they are that we have their attention. They are listening to us for 1 hour, and they would pay anything to get us to read one piece of mail, to answer the phone, to have the lunch, to have coffee. So since they often can't get to the donors, let's use what is perhaps our most effective moment, the pastor's connection, the pastor's lessons to the congregation. The pastor can tell these stories that pastors only know, but you do need to get certainly permission from members, but those are moving to each of us. There's a theology of hope. You can strengthen the message with a strong theological basis that elicits a deeper response. It's all about stewardship is all about discipleship. So if Jesus would have preached 52 Sundays in a year, how many Sundays would be on Monday? The answer is about 17. That's a lot of sermons about money. And most of us, I think, could start reaching towards that. I don't think anyone exceeds it. So as for lay leaders, if it weren't a challenge, none of us would be here on the call. Talking about money is out of our comfort zone, especially within the church. And most of us don't practice our money talking muscles. We just don't have that environment during a typical day. So it feels a little bit awkward and perhaps even contrived. And I think it's safe to say that most of us are confronted by some of these fears that I'll share with you here. First, we're truly afraid of asking for money. I mean, that's one of the top fears of anyone, anywhere. We're certainly afraid of offending someone, making them feel like less than they are. And I want to underline that this year, all of these things are relevant, but that number 2 takes on a different meaning. We could say offending someone is a problem each year. This year it really is because people are harmed. We don't always know who. We want to be especially sensitive that when we invite people, we also give them this freedom from guilt. If they are financially or physically struggling. We also are concerned about leaving someone unappreciated. That's a big deal. We're concerned about being avoided. When I became stewardship chair of my church, that certainly was something that I needed to get used to. I'm suddenly the guy that everyone thinks is going to be asking them for money pretty much constantly. I didn't have as many people approach me at coffee hour. It just is what it is. And rejection, we're certainly nervous about that. These are all very real anticipations. I can prove the anxiety by asking this question: how many people would throw their hands up to volunteer when asking who will be the stewardship chair? I don't remember seeing hands. But these fears are all based on entirely avoidable situations. These are the conversations that we think we're supposed to hold are far more difficult and awkward than the exciting conversations that really we should be leading. Now, granted, some people can do this direct ask, this fundraising approach, hey, will you give us money? And it goes really well. Both parties feel so good and enriched after that. But they're like these fundraising artists. It's a rare thing because most of us probably would stutter awkwardly through the conversation. So for goodness sakes, let's not do it that way. Let's find our own comfortable and more effective conversation to have. So it's got to start with acknowledging who we really are. And here's just 3 reminders of that. For one, as a stewardship leader, we are not a trained fundraising professional. It's not, for most of us, our lifetime call. So we're not likely to even develop the tools to overcome those fears during the years that we're engaged in stewardship, whether it's lay leadership or clergy. Secondly, most of us, especially, well, I'm referring to lay leaders here, we're not theological experts on generosity or giving, so we want to really connect and take some guidance from our pastoral leadership. We're really more the operational and communication side of the team, developing a plan to talk about money and how to view it. And the third thing is the kind of the counterpoint. Be the person that you are in this church family. Don't change to become a air quotes fundraiser, because we're on the same team as those other givers sitting next to us in our own church. This is not a head-to-head negotiation for them to give away money, but it's an invitation to join in ministry. And we're all on the same side of the table working toward the same goals. As a stewardship leader, we're just trying to create this environment, an organizational culture where our mission and goals are clear, and we each see how clearly we are important to getting there. We each see how important we are to getting to that vision. We want everyone to feel like they're joining this family, this corporate giving team to make this ministry happen. So I went back to an old slide. Apologize if any of you have seen this before, but we want to simplify this. Make your message easy on yourself and on your team. So if nothing else, settle on a very general approach, a theme, the guides and plans, the plans for your year. It frames all of your words and your tactics. You can use key terms. And if you have only 2 parts of the message, these could certainly work. First is, this mission matters greatly. This place is amazing. It matters greatly to the congregation. It matters greatly to the community. And it matters greatly to those who come next. Second message, each one of us is essential to realizing this ministry. You greatly matter to this mission. We can make a whole lot of missteps along the way, but if you're consistently conveying message around these 2 themes, you're proving the value of this mission and the value of each of us to the mission. You just can't go wrong with this. So sequencing these messages, we'll just go through 4 steps of this and then wrap it up with a final comment on some tools. So as the operational side of your stewardship program, getting kind of all these, kind of the vision concepts in front of your congregation, we got to get a little bit tactical. So let's talk about 4 types of messaging. Excuse me. And it makes sense usually to go in this order. First is presenting our vision and mission. State what our vision is and relate it to what we're doing on a recurring basis. All of our church's activities can be related to fulfilling this vision. So that all the gifts of time, all the volunteer hours, the talent, the treasure, all of the financial contributions work towards turning us into into the ministry that we say we want to be. Keep it very simple. We have the vision. Now invite fellow members and friends of the church into an opportunity. This concept of invitation is so important because it's different from the traditional ask. A good ask is a wonderful thing, but it's probably out of the comfort zones of many of us. So in the church, an invitation is often much more comfortable for us in the stewardship role, and it's dramatically more comfortable for the member being invited. So Ari Nouwen states that this invitation is the opposite of begging. Fundraising for the church is the opposite of begging, which, as you may sense, is a fear we have of fundraising. Rather, we have a vision that is amazing and exciting, and we are inviting you to invest yourself through your resources in this vital work. And this invitation does not need to be reserved just specifically for conversations. It needs to be dropped throughout the year, especially because we need to be inviting people constantly with the absence from one another, with the absence from the sanctuary, especially for our most vulnerable. That invitation to join us is imperative to have on a recurring basis. Whenever you have something like an impact story or a stewardship story, you also need to have this invitation, this call to action that includes how to be a part of this vision. The call to action is remarkably helpful. You can come back to this slide later. I just dropped something in here that this one church, every now and then they just list all of their great activities. And at the bottom of the list, they'll say, because of you, all of this happened. Please consider your contribution here. So many different ways of tactfully saying it. And then put that link or that call to action. Send your participation through the mail, through the link, or however it's convenient for you. The other thing is we want to touch on the importance of articulating that stewardship message this year. Again, many of you may have seen this. I apologize. I'd be delighted to send out once I collect a few more stewardship letters. There's some outstanding ones there this year that are going through this similar pattern that I've outlined here. It talks about how difficult these times are. It talks about how we in the church are responding to these difficult times. It talks about how much more work it is. We're not on break. We're actually being called into action and doing great things. And we invite everyone who can to either hold fast or increase, to step forward and help carry this load during this most important year. And also to have this compassion. This compassion is absolutely critical because many people are not going to be able to contribute in the way that they had in the past. You don't want to give people the opportunity not to give. That's not what this invitation is. We want to really inspire them in that previous part to give. But you want to let those people who aren't able to, who are truly suffering, the moment to step to the side, heal, the moment to use the church to lean on instead of always holding someone else up. These communications, I think, are absolutely critical this time because we don't want to be deaf to some from, whether they're new or older members, people who've really been there for us in the past. How can we not be there for them? The third point is achievement or impact. Demonstrate that we are accomplishing our mission and vision. Show it. This can be through stories those of us or our community who have been blessed or lifted up by our work. This can be through sharing that narrative budget we've talked about in the past to relate to givers all the time, talent, and treasure that is poured into these ministries areas that our worshiping community has promised to bring through the vision. Especially this year, consider listing, like that other church I referenced, all of the great things that are happening. Many of these things our church is doing are not known by the congregation. So in essence, let's just show how well our church is accomplishing God's work through our church. Now, the risk of not doing so is that our members might seek an alternative way to be God's hands in the world. The church is one way now. It used to be the only way that people would contribute their benevolence. So let's wrap up these the sequencing part with this final concept. Attribute your successes back to the givers of the time, talent, and treasure, because it's no overstatement that none of this would be possible without them. Thank people. Thank them often. You thank them too much if need be. Thank them with written notes, passing them in the hall, in the parking lot. You know, rarely do these thank yous need to be in great detail. Often it probably shouldn't. Also teach others on your team to dole out these thank yous. You know, leadership needs to have that muscle trained to also do that thanking, because it matters when it comes from someone outside of the stewardship role. It matters when it comes from the pastor or leadership. Just drop it in there on occasion. This is all possible because of people like you. If possible within your church, expand it beyond yourself. Stewardship is really a team sport. All of leadership and staff should be more than supportive. They should help regularly, even if this means it's just little things that they do to help with. You can't do it by yourself. I'm realistic in this, that most churches are relieved when someone like you and I come into the position so that it's off of their plates. So the position is often lonely. But our job is to create an environment and a culture that makes money and stewardship normal and comfortable to talk about. But you can't be everywhere. You can't hold every conversation. And in a sense, you know, it would be great if we could be everywhere, but that's just not realistic. But that stewardship person or the committee is building this widespread awareness. It's sustainable over a long period of time, over many years. That person, you and I, are planting that sequencing of messages in all these logical places so that our members and our friends come upon their own conclusion of how generous they can be, so that they start to ask themselves, what can I do to further this ministry? So while you and I might have set the stage and maybe created an environment for that giving moment, we're usually not the one present when that giving thought happens. So at that moment, we're probably not the face of this place. It's more likely a staff member, a session member, or a program participant. So the members of that team need to be aware that their words are vital, that's how we're going to do a great job next year. That enthusiasm, that gratitude to givers and participants is just one of the biggest game changers that there is. Because they're often the ones there at that moment. That moment that's rarely chosen by you or me. Let's wrap this up with a couple of thoughts on tools. So fueling ministry is definitely tougher. We're all feeling it. Now you set the groundwork for a great stewardship program, but for stewardship to actually turn energy into your ministry, your stewards have to take action. So you've got to make this easy. Everyone else in the nonprofit world certainly is. There's almost no distance between the invite and the way to give. I'm not hoping for a guilt cause to inspire you to take action. It's just that now it's the minimum expectation. The level of expectation has been raised so high by the nonprofit world, and we kind of got to get into that system as well. By not providing the right tools, we're not welcoming these upcoming generations to participate in our ministry. And what I mean by the right tools, it's really up to you on what that could be, but generally that means online giving, mobile-friendly things you can do on your mobile device. And the bigger ways to give, like gift securities and IRA qualified charitable distributions, those are significant sources of charitable revenue for our ministries that aren't going to come if they are not easy to do and directly connected with that invitation immediately following as a possibility. This is hopefully not much longer, but plate revenue, that Lilly study recently was saying it's 78% of giving. It's all gone for now. It may come back, but it's not going to come back in the way that it was. These new ways are going to be. Sure. So the right tools in the right place. Sorry for these graphics, they're not coordinated correctly. Make your tools obvious. Having them in the right place is absolutely critical. Make it so that a visitor or any member can do something charitable within a single click or scan of their phone, where they can grab a card from the narthex. Make it super simple to do. And consider whenever you have an impact story, add that tactful invitation and add that mechanism to how to make that immediate gift right now.
What I want to do is just make you aware of a couple more webinars that we have scheduled for October. One is end of year giving. In a messed up year, we often address that type of thing. And then we also have one on October 22nd, which is digital communications for churches. We've got a gentleman that we've worked with for several years who has his own company, and we've asked him to help us learn a little bit more about engaging people and also in measuring our success in doing all that. So in an effort to honor the time, as Carl said earlier, let me draw this to a close. It'll be on our website by tomorrow. Thank everybody for attending. Carl, thank you for helping us out with this. Hopefully you are feeling better. We didn't say anything at the first part of this, but Carl had a little accident, and he looks like he's doing pretty good. So hopefully you feel as good as you look. With all that, let me just say thank you. God bless, and we'll see you next time.